Hey, good day, my beautiful children. Today is Tuesday, April the 28th, and we're going to be continuing our discussion on the Cold War today. Yesterday I started talking to you guys about the Cold War, and I told you that this is this period of history that falls directly after World War II and runs all the way up until the late 1980s between the Soviet Union and its allies and the United States and our allies. And the reason it was called a Cold War is because the Soviet Union and the United States never ever during that time directly fought each other, although they are going to both be involved in what we're going to learn about called proxy wars, like Korea and Vietnam and some other places as well. But it was not a shooting war. All right, so let's talk about the origin of the Cold War here. Um, and Let's see. All right, roots. Cold War, political and economic fronts. Okay, so even though the United States and Soviet Union are not going to ever fight each other, they're going to beat each other's throats for 40 years politically. Every election in the Soviet Union and the United States is going to center around the relationship between those two countries, uh, and there's going to be a ton of stuff as far as nuclear armament buildup and things like that that people are going to be discussing politically, and then economically as well. It boils down to a fight between capitalism and democracy and communism. Um, the Soviet Union, like I mentioned yesterday, is going to be hell bent on trying to extend its sphere of influence and create what are going to be called satellite nations. Those are going to be nations that are geographically close to the Soviet Union, that the Soviet Union is going to try to turn communist. And for the United States and their democratic allies, it's going to be about containment, containing the spread of communism. So that's what this is all about: stopping the spread of communism after World War II. Um, so much of this is going to deal with nuclear weapons. After the United States dropped the two atomic bombs on Japan, and the world was introduced to how horrific atomic weapons are, um, everybody's going to want to get more. The United States is going to begin to build more, and the Soviet Union, who had been trying to develop them, even when as the United States was, they're going to try to create their own. So there's going to be a bunch of treaties during this time that are going to deal directly with atomic weapons. So this first one is called the Baruch Plan, and this was an international agency that was created to inspect any country's atomic energy plants and make sure that they were not trying to create weapons. We have those things today. The United Nations today inspects different countries' um, nuclear plants, power plants, making sure that they're not trying to then turn those plants into producers of atomic weapons. We still have stuff like that today. In the United States, we passed the Atomic Energy Act in 1946, where we began to develop more atomic ways to harness, the splitting of the atom. And instead of using it to bomb people, we're going to use it to produce energy. We still have nuclear power plants, atomic plants that are all over the country uh, today. But, most developed nations in the world today have some form of atomic energy. The trick is to try and keep those countries from then using that technology and turning those plants into a way to produce atomic weapons. We're going to be talking a bunch about nukes and atomic weapons during this unit, so keep that in mind. All right. As far as containment, if you look at this map here, here's the Soviet Union, giant red block, and it's hard to see here, but these are what we call Soviet satellites. So these were countries that were not communist before World War II, but after World War II, the Soviet Union basically took them over and made them communist. So we have Poland, we have the eastern half of Germany here, we have uh, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria, And if you look here, all this red, what the Soviet Union is trying to do is they're trying to link themselves geographically to the Mediterranean to give them access to the trade routes there. Um, and anything in red is communist, anything in blue is democratic, and anything in white was kind of no man's land. Um, so there you go. Um, the United States plan after World War II, the Soviet Union's plan was to turn as many poor countries as they possibly could to communists. Now, we've talked about this before, but who does communism appeal to? The have-nots, the poor. Because if you come to them with a plan, basically where you say, hey, we're going to take money from the people that have it, and we're going to evenly distribute it to the people, those of you that don't, and you don't have to do anything other than follow us. Who wouldn't sign up for that if you're poor? So that was their plan. They're gonna go into countries that were war ravaged after World War II and offer them a hand up by introducing communism there. United States, our plan was called the Marshall Plan. It was named after the Secretary of State George Marshall, and our plan was to spend enough money, basically to give handouts, money to European nations after World War II to keep them from turning communist. Because if you have money, your economy's doing well, there's really not any reason to turn to communism. And so this is really different than the end of World War One. At the end of World War One, the Allies were all about punishing, Germany and other countries. And after World War Two, we were all about helping them out because we were deathly afraid that they would turn to communism. So the United States spent billions of dollars propping these countries like Germany up after World War II and giving them money, basically, I don't know, trying to bribe or pay them into not becoming communists. That's not really what they're doing. But again, the idea is if your country is doing well economically, there is no reason for you to turn to communism. So two very different things going on. We got one country, the Soviet Union, going after poor countries and offering communism as a way to spread the wealth, and we have the United States offering countries money so they don't need the Soviet Union's help. That's what it boils down to. So Berlin is going to become a center of conflict for this. Now, remember, Berlin was the capital city, is the capital city of Germany, and after World War II, Germany was split in half. Soviet Union got the eastern half, and then France, England, and the United States got the western half. And then they took Berlin, which was smack dab in the middle of the Soviet section of East Germany, and they split that in half as well. The eastern half of Berlin was controlled by the communists, by the Soviet Union. The western half was controlled by the United States, the British, and the French. So Berlin, you got this little pocket of capitalism and democracy in this giant sea of communism. If you look here on the map, you can see it. Berlin was right here in the middle of East Germany, and actually, this whole thing is of Berlin. Never mind, but you get the point. All right. So England, France, and the United States, they combined their zones in Berlin to create a one West Berlin, unified West Berlin, that was capitalist and was democratic. And so what the Soviet Union tries to do is they try to basically starve those people out because, again, there's this little tiny pocket of capitalism and democracy in the middle of all of this communism. So they block all incoming roads, canals, and railroads that link Berlin, West Berlin, to the rest of Germany, trying to starve these people out. And what the United States does is, in order to keep them from basically surrendering to communism, over the next 10 months, the U.S. and England, they fly in 2 million tons of food and supplies, and they airdrop them, parachute them in, and drop them into West Berlin to keep them alive, to keep them from starving to death. And it was known as the Berlin Airlift. And it's a really interesting period of history um, because every time a plane flew in to West Berlin, they had to fly in over communist airspace, and every pilot was waiting to get shot down when they would go over, but it never happened because the Soviet Union did not want to risk a war within the United States. So for 10 months, morning, noon, and night, they dropped in supplies to the West Berliners to keep them alive, and it worked. Eventually, the blockades were lifted, and the people of West Berlin were allowed to go about business as usual. So it's an interesting story. One of the other, they dropped all kinds of stuff, food and milk and whatever. There was a candy bomber, which sounds awesome, right? That's like the coolest thing I've ever heard of. The candy bomber is exactly what it sounds like. It was a guy that would drop candy to children just to kind of lift their spirits during the Berlin airlift. And this is what it looked like. You could see how low they would have to fly in to drop this stuff. And those are kids waiting for the candy bomber. That is the candy bomber. It should be painted a lot cooler than that. Obviously, it should be painted in like bright colors and have like candy and pictures on it, but it's not. It's pretty boring. So, all right. This is another picture of one of the insides of the bombers. These guys were obviously dropping milk. There's the candy bomber dropping candy and toys. And this is a picture after the blockade ended that the U.S. put out showing that the U.S. and the airlift had won and defeated the blockade. All right, we're going to stop there today. I'm going to have a couple questions that I'm going to link with this as well for you guys to turn in. We'll do like twice a week. I'll have some questions for you guys. Remember, all you need to do is watch these videos and then submit, so I know that you're watching them to get points. And then, similar to what Mr. Frank had, we'll have a couple of questions every other day for you guys to answer, and you'll get points on that. Let me know if you guys have any questions or you need me to clear anything up for you guys. I'm here for you. And I will see you guys tomorrow. Peace and love.